While the West celebrated breakthroughs in battery technology, China moved quietly. Its actions were decisive, far-reaching, and almost invisible to the public eye. If you want to understand how this could impact your investments, hit like and subscribe now. Share your thoughts in the comments. Beijing classified silver as a strategic, critical mineral. This designation was not symbolic, it was a declaration of control. Export restrictions, licensing rules, and legal leverage became strategic tools. Every ounce mined anywhere could be redirected or withheld. Western economies assumed markets would function freely. They assumed physical supply would match paper contracts. Those assumptions are now dangerously outdated. China can cut off exports with legal justification. Even silver mined in Mexico, Peru, and Canada must pass through Chinese refineries. Beijing controls access to the global market. Analysts have dubbed this the kill switch. Entire industries could halt with a single regulatory decision. Past lessons with gallium and germanium demonstrate the effectiveness of supply control. Rare metals can be weaponized without open conflict. Now silver faces the same reality. It is no longer just a commodity. It is a strategic lever. Solar panel production is particularly vulnerable. TOPCon technology requires silver at levels that allow little margin for error. A sudden restriction could ripple across multiple industries. Electronics, batteries, and even medical devices could face disruptions. China can manipulate supply without appearing aggressive. Trade partners must comply or risk losing access. Western governments are slow to respond. Building domestic refining capacity is a process measured in years. Meanwhile, China sits at the center of a global choke point. Traders describe it as a roach motel. Silver goes in but rarely comes out. Export licenses are becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. Companies must rethink production schedules and contractual obligations. Physical control now determines real market power. The era of the free market for silver is effectively ending. Silver has become a tool of strategic influence. It can shape economies without a single shot being fired. Industries that assumed independence are discovering fragility. Governments that relied on market signals are seeing manipulation. The West must adapt quickly. Failure to do so means being at the mercy of the kill switch. China's planners have studied every global mine. Every shipment, every refinery, every route is accounted for. The export ban is only the first layer. It sets the foundation for broader industrial leverage. Wall Street debates futures. China acts on the physical reality of silver supply. Supply chains once considered secure are now vulnerable. Dependence on Chinese processing creates systemic risk. Even the perception of scarcity drives market behavior. Companies rush to secure contracts, only to find restrictions tightening. Physical silver is increasingly more valuable than paper contracts. The West is slowly realizing that true control lies in possession. Countries that ignored the warning signs are scrambling. They face logistical challenges previously unimaginable. The kill switch is silent, invisible, yet profoundly effective. It does not require force. It requires control. Silver flowing into China rarely flows back out. Foreign mines supply China's industrial demand before any exports are permitted. Western industries are now at the mercy of regulations they cannot influence. The imbalance between production and refining capacity becomes a strategic weapon. Prices begin to reflect more than supply and demand. They reflect leverage, control, and geopolitical strategy. Companies attempting to stockpile silver find themselves blocked. Government permits and licensing slow every transaction. The West has relied on global markets for decades. Now the realization sets in. The free market was conditional, not guaranteed. Beijing has turned a natural resource into a tool of power. Silver is no longer just a metal. It is a geopolitical instrument. The export ban signals a new era. Western nations must navigate a landscape where dependency equals vulnerability. Industrial planners begin contingency strategies. But even emergency measures cannot replace years of refined capacity. Traders and executives realize a stark truth. Physical control, not paper contracts, defines the real market. China's approach is methodical. Every step is calculated, every shipment monitored. The kill switch is not a theory, it is an operational reality. Western nations scramble to respond. Alternative supply chains are slow to materialize. Even temporary shortages trigger cascading effects. Silver scarcity affects electronics, solar panels, medical devices, and energy storage. Beijing has created leverage over multiple sectors simultaneously. The West must compete for metal that China may never release. Strategic minerals, once considered commodities, now become instruments of power. Countries reliant on imports face unprecedented challenges. The export ban is only the beginning. The next stages of the strategy will shape industries, economies, and markets globally. The global silver refining network is even more vulnerable than the West realizes. Nearly 90% of refined silver passes through Chinese-owned facilities. Even mines that produce the purest silver outside China are trapped. The metal enters China, but rarely returns to Western markets. Foreign traders call it a roach motel. Silver goes in. It rarely comes out. Western smelters cannot compete. They lack capacity, technology, and the financial clout to challenge China's dominance. The West is running out of options. Every delay strengthens China's leverage. Prices in London and New York begin to decouple. Physical supply is now determined in Shanghai, not COMEX. China's dual control over refining and domestic demand creates a perfect choke point. The West cannot simply buy its way out of the problem. China dominates the world's silver refining capacity. It controls the majority of smelters, even for metal mined abroad. Every shipment of silver from Mexico, Peru, and other producers must pass through Chinese-owned or affiliated facilities. This creates a dependency the West can no longer ignore. Traders call it the Roach Motel. Silver goes in but rarely comes out. The West lacks sufficient domestic refining infrastructure. Even if mines produce enough metal, it cannot be processed without Chinese facilities. This isn't a future risk. It is the current reality. Companies attempting to refine silver domestically find themselves at a technical and financial dead end. Building new facilities requires billions in investment and years of construction. Meanwhile, China continues to expand its refining capabilities. New smelters come online, with advanced technology and enormous throughput. The refinement process itself is another layer of control. Only Chinese refineries can produce certain high-purity grades of silver required for advanced solar panels and electronics. Western industries cannot replicate these processes overnight. They are effectively locked out. Every ounce of silver, even mined outside China, becomes a tool of leverage. The metal flows east, where it is processed, and rarely returns west. Contracts and futures markets no longer reflect reality. Paper silver prices can rise or fall, but the physical supply is the true constraint. Traders in London and New York begin to feel the pressure. Orders for physical silver are delayed or rejected. China controls not just supply, but timing. It can release shipments strategically, affecting industries and markets. The refinery choke point is a weapon, not in the conventional sense, but in the power it grants over production and pricing. Western executives scramble for solutions. Alternative smelters in Europe or the Americas are limited, slow, and expensive. Physical silver stockpiles are no longer a guarantee. Even reserves can be trapped in the choke point. The energy sector is among the first affected. Solar panel manufacturers cannot access enough silver to meet production targets. Electronics firms face shortages for critical components. Medical device manufacturers are forced to delay production. The ripple effect spreads globally. Supply bottlenecks in one industry affect others downstream. China's dominance in refining creates both scarcity and pricing power. Western companies must compete with Chinese domestic demand. This dual pressure, industrial and geopolitical, gives Beijing unprecedented leverage. It can influence markets without firing a shot. Even countries with significant silver production cannot bypass China. Mined metal is exported for processing, and processed silver rarely leaves Chinese control. Smelters in Mexico and Peru cannot scale quickly. Local infrastructure and technology are insufficient to bypass the East. Wall Street analysts begin to factor in the choke point. Paper contracts become less relevant as physical supply dictates real-world prices. Companies that previously relied on futures markets now confront a new reality. Access to metal, not price speculation, determines operational survival. The refinery choke point also creates a form of artificial scarcity. Even when global mining output is sufficient, Western industries cannot obtain processed silver. This scarcity drives up physical prices dramatically. Markets respond, but Western buyers remain constrained. China can release metal strategically. Timing shipments gives them control over global industrial output. Executives begin to understand that the free market for silver is ending. Physical possession, not financial contracts, has become the true measure of power. Even emergency stockpiles cannot fully protect industries. Licenses, export controls, and processing requirements create delays and uncertainty. Western governments scramble to respond. New smelters and domestic refining projects are proposed, but they take years to become operational. The refinery choke point has exposed vulnerabilities in Western supply chains. Dependencies once ignored are now critical weaknesses. Investors and traders shift focus from futures to physical holdings. Silver ETFs and paper contracts no longer guarantee operational security. Every shipment is scrutinized. Every refinery becomes a bottleneck and a potential weapon. Even industries with significant reserves face risk. Refined silver cannot be obtained quickly enough to meet global demand. China's control over refining allows it to dictate both supply and quality. Certain high-purity grades required for advanced applications are only produced domestically. Western companies cannot replicate these grades at scale. Technology and expertise are concentrated in Chinese facilities. This gives Beijing leverage not only over the market but over critical industries. Electronics, renewable energy, and high-tech manufacturing are all affected. The choke point is systemic. It is built into the very infrastructure of global silver production. Even global mining output cannot bypass it. Processing is the true bottleneck. and China controls it entirely. Every ounce that leaves a mine becomes part of China's strategic calculus. Control over refining is control over the global market. The consequences extend beyond industry, economic policy, national security, and technological advancement all hinge on access to silver. Western governments have no quick solution. Building competitive refining capacity is slow, costly, and technologically complex. Traders begin to call it the dual market. Paper contracts diverge from physical reality, with Shanghai dictating real-world prices. China's choke point forces the West into reactive strategies. Emergency stockpiles, alternative sourcing, and industrial rationing become necessary. Even with extraordinary effort, production delays are unavoidable. Refined silver is limited and demand continues to grow. The global silver market is no longer free. Control rests with the country that dominates refinement. China's strategy is not about scarcity alone. It is about leverage, timing, and the ability to dictate. Industrial outcomes. Western industries are being forced to compete with China's domestic consumption. Even abundant global supply cannot guarantee access. This creates uncertainty in pricing and planning. Physical availability becomes the most critical metric. Companies scramble to secure shipments well in advance. Speculators and traders struggle to match real-world logistics with financial instruments. The choke point also amplifies geopolitical influence. Countries reliant on processed silver must consider Chinese policies in every strategic decision. Supply chains are no longer purely economic. They have become instruments of political leverage. China's control over refining is a silent weapon. It affects the West without firing a single shot. Even minor disruptions in Chinese smelters ripple globally. Industrial production halts and pricing volatility spikes. The choke point solidifies China's power. It turns silver into a strategic asset, not a mere commodity. Western industries must rethink everything. Dependence on foreign refining is a vulnerability, even investments in domestic smelting cannot resolve immediate needs. New facilities take years, and specialized technology is required. Global production is abundant, but access is limited. The choke point creates scarcity where none naturally exists. Every decision in Beijing is calculated. Timing, allocation, and processing determine global industrial health. Western nations can no longer act independently. They must negotiate access, invest in alternatives, or risk operational paralysis.